Welcome, everyone, to today's panel session titled Digital Health, Effective to Support Mental Health Literacy in the Black Community. I am Dr. Devlin Jackson, the moderator for this afternoon's panel, and I have the privilege and honor to be able to moderate this discussion with our esteemed colleagues and scholars in the field, Dr. Henry Willis, Dr. Stacy Little, and Dr. Kevin Washington. And as you already know, in this session, we will discuss opportunities and challenges that digital health presents in supporting mental health literacy within the Black community. And we hope that much of this discussion, our practitioners and providers and attendees today will learn some great strategies and approaches to serving the members of our Black community. So without further ado, we are going to begin with our first presenter, Dr. Kevin Washington. All right, Dr. Washington, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, thank you. That was real quick, real smooth. I just wanted to thank you all for the honor and privilege to be able to be here to share in this powerful conversation about how do we engage in doing the work in a way that is meaningful and that also has great impact. I'm going to actually present some slides, and I'm actually going to go through this process very quickly because of the amount of time that we have to present, but it is my hope and honor that it is most impactful. So when we talk about doing the work with a population that has been disenfranchised, we must critically analyze the historical context. Too many times our treatment, our interventions begin in a very estranged place, not acknowledging how did we get here. So I want to give some background information into the trauma within the Black community, the mental health process and practices that may be amiss and actually may be a hit, and also deal with the dynamics that are actually really impacted psychologically and physiologically. When we talk about this idea of trauma, we must recognize that there are perpetual elements of trauma, which is why I suggest that we don't have post, and I'll talk about that momentarily, but we don't have post because post means that we are beyond the particular process, and that when you have it ongoing, I call it persistent. And so we'll share more about why we call it persistent enslavement systemic trauma as opposed to post-traumatic issues. We have events of the media that projects perpetually Black inferiority that begins to impact psychological and physiological well-being. We have an educational system that speaks to European superiority. The major conversation even in this era is about critical race theory and how it makes European Americans feel badly, but there's no conversation really about how generations of people of African descent have gone into educational systems, have heard about themselves being banjo playing, watermelon seeds, spitting pickaninnies in school, being enslaved and supposed to be excited about that process and how it has psychologically damaged that population. The disparities in the healthcare system, the economic inequities that we find all over the entire country. Racial profiling remains an ongoing dynamic and challenge, as well as the excessive involvement within the penal system, which speaks to a perpetual enslavement process. And even in states like Louisiana on the ballots right now, coming up in November, is a discussion about the shifting of the language of involuntary servitude within the 15th Amendment, about the 13th Amendment, about what it means to be enslaved or to be incarcerated. And so that is an ongoing process about enslavement being an extension of the plantations, because enslavement is still legal within the context of one who's been found guilty of a crime. Mental health misdiagnosis, our professionals often don't know clearly how to deal with the healing of a population because they don't know really the dynamics of the population. And we're dealing with perpetual political disenfranchisement. Even again, today we're talking about gerrymandering and so forth. So this idea of being disenfranchised from the process of being seen as human in this space is critical. So we talked then about transgenerational trauma and how this trauma is passed on from one generation to the next. And Diaz and Reza did a very powerful study when they looked at mice, and they showed where these mice that would have some shock, something that would be traumatizing to them. At the same time, they would have the smell of orange blossom, and then they would identify the smell with the shock, the trauma of the shock. And these mice would have pups, and these pups would smell the orange blossoms, but no shock, and their bodies would have a visceral response. And these pups would grow up and have pups, and they would have the same experience, though they never were shocked. They would have the smell, and the smell would trigger a particular traumatic response within these animals. And so we recognize that there's some capacity to pass down elements of trauma from one generation to the next that has to always be checked. So we have to then examine that more closely to see how it will apply to humans. But Resla also said that there's a way to pass down the trauma responses, that they even taught mice how to mediate the trauma with some type of activities, and that was passed down genetically as well. So we know then that the healing can be moved forward. So I talk about persistent enslavement systemic trauma, or PEST. This idea that is protracted residual effect of an enslavement experience and or ideology that creates a condition of psychological devastation, spiritual disruption, emotional destabilization, economic disinheritance, and political disenfranchisement. And so when we talk about interventions, we are intervening around these particular issues. We already know some of the data that suggests to us that a population has the occurrence of mental health, mental distress, 20% more likely issues of mental health among Blacks than whites. Adult Blacks living below poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to report serious psychological distress. The major challenge is that where are the interventions for these populations? Adult Blacks are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, worthlessness, despair. And also we look at the increase of suicide attempts among African Americans, especially among African American females at this time. It was among males, now it's African American females. We have to be critical about analyzing the elements of transgenerational trauma that's been untreated that's impacting these things. We know that discrimination has played a role in this and has had a deleterious effect on African American men, especially, but the entire community. That rage, anger, frustration, bitterness, resentment, grief, and despair have one at a higher risk of mental health outcomes. And so we have to think about how do we buffer them. And some say economics does not buffer it. We have to deal with the issue of health and health care that will do so. More than 1 in 4 adults experience a diagnosis of mental health in their lifetime, mental health disorder, and each year, and that this is something that is really occurring at a higher rate among African Americans than it has in the past, maybe because of self-report, but also I would submit that some of this is because of the treatment. The issues have never really been treated. We recognize that there is an influence on the body, as we talk about psychological, the psychophysiological effects of this, the issues of dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol, and GABA are implicated in this process. We know that when one has a fight or flight response, the adrenaline increases, but we want to talk about also cortisol that increases, which then contributes to coronary heart disease. That also the adrenaline process can be influential in kidney renal failure. And also diabetes is implicated in all of this stuff about sugar regulation. And so we're suggesting then that untreated trauma has not only handed down this issue of psychological unrest, but it also contributes to physiological despair, which deals with the issue of health and health care. And so this is why this work is so important and so critical, is that how do we begin to intervene with the population that is not receiving treatment like it should, in part because we have to have innovative ways of intervening. When we talk about the allostatic load and stress level, we know that, again, as I mentioned, HBP, high blood pressure, is implicated in this process, and poor glucose regulation. And so all of these things are killing a population. We would submit that people die more from what's eating them than from what they're eating. People die more from what's eating them than from what they're eating. And when you have generational issues that have never been addressed, tied to the psychological processes, we can begin to see that there are some issues that have to be tuned into. So we have to deal with the issue of elevated cortisol. And as mentioned earlier, when the cortisol level is increased, not only does it cause other problems, right? Plaque to build up in the arteries, but then plaque then can cause blockage, which can lead to coronary heart disease, which can lead to death. And so we are talking then about a life or death situation. And so we have to begin to look at ways to impact the population. When there was a conversation about the COVID-19 conversation, it was suggested somehow that it was impacting the population because nobody really knew why. They were vulnerable. The issue was being vulnerable from social cultural factors that impact the physiological aspect of a human functioning, which deals with the lower immune system, resistance level, inflammation, increase processes, possibilities of disease. And so we talk about technology and how can technology be implicated. We know about the various types of technology that exist, the blog, the social media pieces, Instagram, TikTok, and others. We know about various postings, the mental health competency trainings that organizations have. One organization that is doing this very well, and I'm saying it because they're doing a good job of it, but also I'm involved in that process, is with the Boris L. Henson Foundation, with Taraji P. Henson as the lead, talking about competency training for mental health professionals, which also has a digital component to it. The cultural literacy work that we also are engaged in barbershops to bring about a level of awareness. And the next level is to be able to have apps and so forth that barbers can link into, that the customers, clientele, the QR codes and other things, to be able to understand what is depression, what is the allostatic load, and how can one get treated. Also, the alternative ways of addressing this would be through yoga, through movement, integrative medicine, the foods that we consume. And so we share in these possibilities of interventions. I will submit then, as a professor at Grambling State University, we implemented a way to impact the campus community through the insight of the media communications persons, Tisha Arnold and others, that she said, look at, let's do Wellness Wednesdays. And so we provided content that appeared via such as like PSAs that were piped through the university. Again, this is technology that the students are tuned into every week. Wellness Wednesdays would show up, and also students organized. We organized the students to be able to appear on a talk show, radio talk show. So at the campus radio station, these students would record their conversation. It'd be in queue, and so on Wednesdays it would play, and so the students were able to engage in a conversation of health and wellness around various topics. And so I just wanted to share that there are multiple ways of talking about digital technology, and one of them, the technology, was how do we get in the airways, and that was through the campus radio and television process. We know that, again, we talked about in these sessions, suicide among Blacks, adjusting to college life after COVID. What was really a hot topic was the aggression that was being meted out against African Americans at HBCUs. And so all of this was part of that conversation, because these things were impacting their mental health and wellness. And of course, they had to look these items up to be able to be conversant in the context of a talk show. We do these things because we have to find ways to regulate the allostatic load, or how to impact it. And we know that rest and the sleep and rest are two different things, but rest, sleep, regular exercise, eating fruits and vegetables. And these are things that I talked about when I did the Wellness Wednesdays for the radio station. And it was very short. They only gave me 1 minute to do that. And it had to be a quick hit. Things like, just give you one example, where the British and American researchers found that people who ate more than two servings of fruit and vegetables daily reported higher levels of happiness than those who ate less. I would always say that if you find somebody around you that's unhappy, give them an apple, something, maybe they'll feel better. But the point is, we were talking then about how to impact change. And this is some of the content that was shared in that space. We were promoting, of course, the idea of love and wellness. Love and wellness and self-love was very critical. We talked about the issue of mind, self-talk. How do you do that? How do you engage in that process of understanding that 90% of all talk that goes on is self-talk? We engage in the process of visualization, how to relax, how to become more focused. So we did some mindfulness work as well, and we're still doing that work. Again, this is stuff that's done via media. Social media also is what's happening. So right now, currently, as the student is developing for the student body via Instagram and or Facebook one of those social media outlets, not TikTok, we're debating about that one, but that would post this kind of content from the psychologist, sociology department about how to do these things, so students can click into this and see, how do I visualize, and these are steps to engage in to do so. We also talk about cultural competence among professionals, and how do we promote that entire process as well. And so these things are talked about. I want to share also with the few minutes that I have left, is something that we thought was very powerful, which was going into barbershops and promoting mental health among barbers, because we recognize the impact, the social impact of barbers within the Black community. And so we understand historically that it was a profession that catered to white men to get them ready for the world, and then Reconstruction shifted to take care of Black men. We understand that historically there have been several financial institutions that came out of this. The Atlanta life insurance came out of this with Alonzo Herndon, who actually bought a swath of land in Jacksonville, Florida, for his people to vacation. There was John Merrick, who started the North Carolina Mutual Insurance Company. And so this was a space of wealth, a building, political discussion, and racialized discourse took place. Politicians actually had to meet in those spaces to be able to gain some leverage during Reconstruction, and then that shifted after Reconstruction. Shortly after, we have the Jim Crow laws, and that began to send things into a hellspin. But we see these spots, the barbershop, as a place of intimacy, zone of liberation. Equality is expressed. The barber is the one that is in control. The idea of normalization and information hubs, and so these things deal with the issue of the barbershops as being healing. So our resolve then is to look at ways to make technology interactive and or engaging, create pathways for technology interfacing. That is, that where the populations can get a hold of it. So that's what we're doing with, of course, the media piece at Grambling State University, and television and radio, going into the community, making the technology available. But also, as professionals, we lead discussions in this space. So we're not simply dropping off content, but we're actually having a presence to make an impact. We provide opportunities then for these populations to interface with the technology to tell us how to make it better. And how to increase the accessibility of technology for the population. One group that we're doing that with is with Bashan Shaw, who has the You Are a Warrior app. And so I'm helping to develop that one right now for our organization. And she is a 2-time cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor, and she has people to share their experiences. And then as a result, we talk about strategies for elevating your health and wellness, again, talking about the dynamics of fruits and vegetables and so forth and so on, but more importantly, giving strategies for a psychogenic self-talk to be able to move as it relates to affirmations, and also engaging in physical activities that helps one regulate the allostatic load. So with that, I will take a pause and move out of the way so that the other people can share their brilliance to make sure that we have equity in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Washington. Wow, I have so many questions and comments. And I love what you said. People are dying from what's eating them, not what they are eating. So let's now transition on to Dr. Little, so then we can move to Dr. Willis and get into our discussion. Thank you, Dr. Washington, for starting us off. Oh, do you need any assistance, Dr. Little?
Yes, I'm looking actually for my slides and I'm having a bit of a challenge. Hold on. I just saw them. So where did they go?
Do you need me to share them on my end?
Yes, please, if you could, that would be
Okay.
great. Oh, no, here they are. I'm sorry. Here they are. No worries. Here we go. Sorry to slow up the process.
No problem. No worries.
All right. So let's get started. Thank you for having me. So I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Washington said. He just gave us such a wonderful historical backdrop for where we are today and some of the challenges and the social, cultural, historical factors that really drive mental health in the Black community. And approximately 7 million individuals identify as having mental illness in the Black community in the United States, and 13.4% of those people identify, as Black, but represent only 17% of those with mental illness. And part of this has to do with the amount of stigma that exists around mental illness in the US. There's a lot of stigma, as well as a lot of stigma within underrepresented communities, such as Black and Brown communities. When we think about mental health and culture and what that means, right? Within the Black community, there are a lot of cultural beliefs around mental illness and the whether or not one should seek healthcare, even whether or not something we should keep within our own families, keep within our church communities, and to work through our illnesses through those mechanisms, as opposed to seeking care when care may be needed. Also, some of the health practices and financial barriers that come along with seeking care when you perhaps may be living in a under-resourced family, or a family that, or you're an individual who doesn't have full healthcare access. These are some of the things that keep people from seeking health-seeking behaviors. Then when they get into the healthcare system, there's sometimes some stigmatized based approaches to care that have to do with one's race, that have to do with one's gender, that has to do with how someone is insured, what's their educational level, what's their the way in which the style in which they communicate, how they dress, or their physical appearances sometimes also make a difference in how they're treated once they hit the doors of a healthcare facility. So these are things that we have to keep in mind and understand, that help to foster and help to kind of fuel the attitudes that already exist, and some of the fears and some of the stigmas that exist within communities of color, and particularly Black and Brown communities. Also, as racism, let's be clear. That's Dr. Washington outlined that very well for us. There's racism has historical context for us in our communities, and there are everyday microaggressions and many traumas that people who are just living Black in America experience, and people really can't avoid that. You can't avoid when you wake up every day and you have brown skin and you have a Black face and you come from a Black family. You can't avoid that. You live in that truth every day, and there are certain things that you are experiencing that promote and evoke stress in your workplace, and when you go to the grocery store, when you educate your children, and how people assess your children based on their gender and their race. School curricula sometimes ignore and minimize the contributions, right? So we have to really begin to look at some of these historical things that have been happening to Black people in particular within this country that help to fuel racism. It's banks and how one gets access to credit. It's the redlining and access to housing. It's mass incarceration and targeted policing, right? And racial profiling that I think we have as a society we have experienced in a very profound way in the last couple of years with national cases that have put this to present day light. Okay, why is that not moving? When we think about racial trauma, we can't just think about it in terms of how it is affecting an individual. It really is affecting our communities. It's affecting our children and what they're seeing, and how they're watching what is happening in our country play out in media, play out on news, and the impact it has on them as little people, and they're trying to figure out their place in the world. And these, daily attacks, daily stressors, just being a Black boy in America, and, the reality of what that means as you grow up. When you're younger, these things are, your transgressions, or maybe your aggressive attitude, or maybe, you're just curious, or maybe you're very ambitious and adventurous. But when you become older, now that becomes aggression, that becomes a social problem, that becomes fear of you. So we have to understand the implications of just being Black in America, and what that means to someone's emotional self. What are some of the racial biases that go on? Well, when we talk about healthcare and mental health, because for me, I can't talk about them, in a vacuum. The two go together. When people have mental health, behavioral health needs, they need access to equitable and safe and just healthcare. But within our healthcare system, we have some clinicians sometimes who emphasize the mental health needs of Black and brown communities. Sometimes and this is research based. Sometimes the psychotic symptoms are overemphasized. Sometimes symptoms are overlooked. And so Black men, studies show, are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. We also see that among, again, people of color. Youth of color with behavioral health and mental health conditions are more likely to be directed into the juvenile justice system. They're more likely to end up incarcerated. And this is when compared to their counterparts who are non-Black or non-white, non-Black or Latino white youth. And they also have higher rates of harsher disciplinary actions when they are incarcerated, or they do find themselves facing safety and policing systems in their communities. So cultural incompetence within healthcare systems help to fuel the problem, if you will. If I cannot get appropriate health care when I seek from the source where I should be seeking care, that helps to fuel my fears around getting access to care, getting the resources I need to care for myself, and to feel like the person in front of me is offering me competent and compassionate care. So it's important that we keep this in mind, and we demand a more culturally competent healthcare system and culturally competent healthcare providers within our health systems. And we think about it from a cultural competency continuum, right? Sometimes, and particularly now, this whole idea of diversity, inclusion, and equity has become very, very pronounced throughout our nation. And cultural competency isn't a concept. It is a behavior. You have to embody this level of proficiency that one expects of individuals who serve diverse communities. It's one thing if you live in a monolithic community and no one is closed and it's just you, then you can live in this world where you don't have any cultural competencies. But that's not the world we live in, and particularly not in most places in the United States. And in the world. I mean, we're a global society. So we really have to be able to look within ourselves, and to begin to do this very difficult work and very sometimes uncomfortable work of checking ourselves and making sure we're coming from a non-biased and non-judgmental approach to care. And where do we have some challenges, and how do we get our team members up to speed so that they can make sure they're providing the best care to the patients, regardless of how they present, regardless of what their color of their skin is, or their gender, or their age, making sure that we're providing that best care. And when we look at some of the studies around cultural competency in healthcare. A study that was done by the American Psychiatric Association found that physicians were 23% more verbally dominant and engaged in 33% less patient-centered communication with Black patients than with white patients. So what does that mean? They're more likely to dictate to the patient, to not have really a conversant discussion about the healthcare of that person, not really allowing that person to engage in their own healthcare decisions. And so it's important to kind of just keep this in mind. It's more of a patriarchal kind of approach to healthcare than a cooperative approach to healthcare. We also know that within healthcare, we have algorithms that are inherently racially biased and dictate patient care. These algorithms help the physician to make decisions around treatment, medications provided, et cetera. And some health systems have begun looking at this as ways in which we can pick away at some of the inherently racially biased approaches to healthcare in the US, and have begun looking at some of these, algorithms. So what would enhance, what can we do to enhance mental health literacy? One of the things that we can do is every patient we encounter should be encountered with the lens of health equity and equity, not making assumptions about patients based on race, age, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and income. Making sure that there's an equitable, non-biased approach to care, and recognizing the origin of potential fear and distrust in systems, and not negating these fears as irrational thinking. When we employ people, we need to make sure we're employing people that look like the people we serve, that we have trained providers who are trained in racial trauma. In social services and human services, we do a lot of trauma-informed care training for our providers. We should be doing that same kind of care. We should be doing that same kind of training for our medical providers, so they understand what is racial trauma, so that they understand what are microaggressions that people of color experience every day in their life, particularly Black and brown people. Using navigators and people who are navigators of healthcare, who are representative of the population, to help people understand these very complex systems so that they can get access to care. Utilizing digital tools. What we're coming here today about, telehealth and mobile apps and personal devices to assist patients into being more involved and engaged in their care, knowing how to use their patient profile. A lot of patients have profiles, but they don't know how to use them. They don't know how to go into these systems to get access to them. They don't even know that they have access to their entire chart, that they have access to all their labs. But, because we don't do, the health systems have to do their due diligence to ensure patients are literate around these various mechanisms that they can use to support their own health care. Virtual visits are great, and these telehealth is wonderful. Now, I just want to put a caveat out there for people with mental illness. Televisit only may not be the only answer. So yes, digital tools are great, but they are just that. They are tools. They're not the instead of. They don't replace the one-on-one care with a provider therapist that a lot of times people with mental illness need. So we talked about those digital tools, like the personal devices that actually track your heart rate. They can track your exercise. There are ways in which you can get patients to share, having via telehealth to talk to providers around how they feel today, their journaling that they may be doing. You could even have electronic journaling that is shared with the clinician, so that they can be looking at the daily journals electronically to get a sense of where patients might be from a behavioral health perspective. So there are things that you can do to enhance a patient's care, even utilizing the phone as a text message to your therapist, or a text message to your provider to talk about you might need to come in for an emergency visit or needing to talk to someone. So these are ways that patients can quickly engage in care, but we have to be thinking through all of the potential challenges that preclude them from being able to use these mechanisms, and thinking through, okay, how do we really bridge the gap? How do we make sure they have access to? How do we make sure they have navigators and providers who are thinking about all the potential social, economic challenges and barriers that may exist, or fear that may exist, and stigma that may exist in utilizing any of these tools, and for that matter, utilizing healthcare just in general. So when I believe this is my last slide. So when we talk about how we drive culturally relevant health literacy in our systems, I'm a firm believer that community drives change, and we need the advocates. We need families who have family members who have behavioral health and mental health needs to be advocating for better health care, for more culturally competent providers, for providers who are trauma informed and racial trauma trained. We need to have clarity around the language within health systems so that individuals can get access to the information they need in the language in which they speak. We need individuals who can support people when they hit the front door of health systems, so that they're not wandering around looking for, where do I go next? So wayfinders and those kinds of people who help to connect people once they get into health systems. And then always, I encourage families, if you've had a negative experience in any health system, I don't care if it's a community health system, a hospital, your MCO, I don't want to call out any particular one, you let them know you had a bad experience, because if you don't, they won't know it. And change can only come about when people understand that there's a problem. So let's escalate those problems. Let's try to improve our systems so that we can provide better health care to communities who really do deserve better mental health services. And we just need to do a better job at that, just generally. I believe that's my last slide. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Little. A lot of great, insightful information for us to think about with our challenges as well as potential opportunities as well. Thank you so much. So in our remaining time, we're going to move right on to Dr. Willis.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm excited to discuss my work around culturally adapting mobile health technologies to improve mental health equity for Black young adults. But first, why mobile health technologies in the first place? So as our panelists have already brought up, there are a lot of different barriers to traditional mental health treatments for Black youth and young adults that contribute to the ongoing disparities that we see in mental health care. So for example, we know that Black young adults are less open to treatment because they would like to self-manage their symptoms and are less likely to see a need for professional help. And there might be a lot of reasons why Black young adults are hesitant to seek this help. For instance, a long history of cultural mistrust that stretched back to the Tuskegee experiments and the Henrietta Lacks experience. And more recently, research has found that among Black youth and young adults, psychologists are still believed to be insensitive to the Black experience. And another reason could be due to stigma related to mental health treatment. And recent studies continue to highlight that Black young adults have higher levels of stigma related to mental health and mental health treatments. And before we develop, these new mobile health technologies for African Americans, it's important to consider if these technologies are even an effective form of treatment for mental health. Or said another way, should we even consider mobile health as a way for addressing these disparities? And so luckily, research has shown that mobile health technologies for mental health can reduce maladaptive symptoms such as depression, anxiety, and substance use. And it's been shown to be effective for promoting better mental health practices overall. So if you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, you've probably used it to help manage some of, your exercise count or your sleep, et cetera. And even when mobile health technologies are culturally adapted, we see that they are more effective than traditional kind of telehealth and mobile health treatments. Yet there's still a lot of gaps that remain in kind of mobile health research, primarily the fact that Black young adults are still underrepresented in this type of research, despite their high ownership of smartphones. And this is really important because we know Black young adults suffer from negative mental health symptoms at either similar or greater rates than that of their white peers, yet they're 7 times less likely to have access to effective treatment. And increased access is particularly important today, given the rising rates of suicide among Black youth and a lot of the unforeseen or probably predictable mental health consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. But finally, in order to be effective, it's important that these technologies are culturally adapted to meet the unique experiences of African Americans. So in order to kind of expand what we know about culturally adapting mobile health technologies for Black young adults, I conducted a mixed method study to collect this information. And in this study, we explored how cultural beliefs and experiences influence Black young adults' perceptions of their own mental health and their likelihood for seeking mental health services. We explored what features they would want in culturally adapted mobile health technologies. And we also had them experiment with some existing mobile health technologies to see if what's already on the market is appropriate and accessible to this group. And just briefly, I'll highlight that during this study, we had about 40 Black young adults across about 12 different focus groups. And this was, the average age was 21, and most of our sample were women. And so first, we explore how cultural beliefs and experiences influence Black young adults' perceptions of mental health and mental health services. Because in order for mobile health to be effective, we gotta know how cultural experiences influence young adults' perceptions of these services. And so one of the really important things that came out were that Black young adults highlighted a variety of culturally specific barriers that prevent them from utilizing some of the traditional mental health services. So, in addition to participants describing instances of stigma, they also described a lack of awareness about mental health or the need for mental health services. They also discussed how many of their families and how they perceive older generations misunderstood the nature of mental health and mental health services. And so they would discuss things as how if they were depressed, it would misinterpret it as something that was controllable or a sign of laziness. They also discuss receiving messages from their family members related to the importance of hiding their symptoms so that they can appear strong and not be vulnerable or seen as weak, as well as relying exclusively on religious or non-medical interventions to cope with mental health symptoms. And we know that religion can be an important factor in helping people cope with mental health symptoms. But some of our group participants, talked about how when they were asking about help for seeking mental health services, they were told to drink tea and pray instead. And they felt really invalidated. And so this led to overall a sense of a lack of social support around seeking mental health among Black families. And taken together, these findings highlight that a lack of education around mental health, which is influenced by systemic and structural factors that racism and factors that historically affect Black communities, contribute to these negative attitudes about mental health treatments and decreases the likelihood that Black young adults utilize traditional mental health services. Another kind of barrier that our participants talked about was how they perceived that they were at a disadvantage when seeking mental health services compared to their white peers, or as one person put it, doors are open for white people. And so they believe that white young adults have increased access to mental health services, and they feel as if their white peers' families have more knowledge about mental health and mental health services, and how they believe that conversations around mental health are less stigmatized in white communities. And these cultural and systemic factors contribute to disparities in utilizing mental health care between Black and white young adults. And even more alarming, even when they do seek mental health services, they often describe a variety of systemic barriers that prevent them from fully utilizing those services, such as a lack of therapists of color or people of color in these spaces, or as one person put it, the only Black person they saw when they went to a mental health clinic was the receptionist. They talked about the cost of sessions being too expensive or insurance not adequately covering their mental health needs. They also talked about a lack of providers in predominantly Black and or low income communities. Next, this study started to explore what features Black young adults would actually want in culturally adapted interventions. And this is particularly important because no study to date had incorporated Black young adults into the development process of these types of technologies. And so very briefly, I'll highlight that some of the things that they definitely wanted in these technologies were inspirational quotes that would help boost their mood and self-esteem, especially quotes related to the Black experience. They described wanting access to meditation resources and deep breathing activities within apps to help them cope with stress. They wanted to be able to personalize their mental health, mobile health apps, and receive personal recommendations to help them track their mental health symptoms and reminders to engage in self-care. And they also wanted, psychological assessments to help them learn more about their mental health symptoms. And additionally, they also highlighted a variety of culturally relevant features that these technologies should incorporate, such as activities to promote racial identity exploration. And this could look like mini games or short readings that describe positive qualities of the Black experience. They also described wanting content related to racial identity development. They wanted the ability to discuss their identity or even discuss experiences of discrimination. And they also wanted some ability to process racial discrimination and to identify, not only if an experience was a discrimination or a microaggression, but really also receive positive affirmations and quotes that would help them process and cope with these experiences. And finally, the study explored if there were any current interventions that or mobile health technologies that Black young adults would find useful. And of the apps that are on the market, I'm sure there are many more now. The ones that we explored in this study were all free apps, and 3, as you can see, were developed by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, but they're based on evidence-based mental health interventions. And the last one is actually a culturally adapted mental health app called The Safe Place, specifically for Black people. So if there's anybody watching, all of these apps are on the market, and you can download these and use them in your practice as well. But just very briefly, all those young adults in our study described some positive aspects of these interventions. None of the most popular free apps that were available at the time fully met the current needs of this group. And particularly, they described that, these technologies didn't have all the features that were attractive or that they felt were useful in kind of coping with their mental health needs. They often found some of them overwhelming, unappealing, and they highlighted that most of the apps, of course, the ones outside of the one tailored for Black young adults, lacked culturally relevant resources. And so overall, hopefully what you're taking from this is that the development of free and culturally adapted mobile health technologies is an urgent necessity for Black young adults. In terms of policy, we need more funding to increase the development of these technologies. And in terms of practices, we need more training for clinicians and mental health service providers to learn how to effectively utilize these technologies in treatment. And one of the really opportunities for mobile health technologies is that it can be used to reduce stigma individually and within communities. So these technologies can provide psychoeducation that can help dismantle some of the negative socialization messages about mental health that Black young adults receive from others. And it might even increase perceived social support and reduce stigma of mental health among those across generations within Black communities. And so very briefly, taking a lot of the concepts from this work, myself and other collaborators have begun to explore what culturally adapted mobile health technologies could look like. And this is one kind of mock-up based on input for Black young adults that we have started to develop. And so as you can see, it has an ongoing onboarding process that discusses the importance of managing mental health. It also incorporates the ability to create a profile for Black young adults to actually begin to track their mood and emotions over time. It assesses stigma and previous knowledge about therapy so that it can maybe push psychoeducation to help people learn more about mental health and mental health treatments. And it also collects information so folks can actually tailor the specific things that they would want to work on based on their values and needs. And as you can see from there, a lot of the questionnaires are then used to help push culturally tailored resources, such as culturally tailored books and readings that revolve around specific topics relevant to the Black experience, such as community violence and police violence. It also incorporates a GPS to help people find mental health services in their community. And this is something that we're still working on, creating a directory of also Black therapists and culturally tailored services in local communities. And finally, and most importantly, it also incorporates a community aspect so folks can have a forum and be able to discuss not only mental health issues, but also race-related kind of experiences such as discrimination or activism. And there are also like things that folks that are related to folks' values, such as sports and riding, that they can explore. So for instance, in what this would look like is folks will post about their experiences and also receive support from other users and hopefully very soon verify mental health providers in kind of coping with and processing these experiences. And so very briefly, just kind of future directions for mobile health technologies for Black young adults is it's important that community-based participatory approaches are used when developing these technologies. And we also must start to target the unique mental health needs in specific communities. So right now, I am working with collaborators and we're developing an app for treating grief in light of community violence and loss related to COVID-19 among Black youth and young adults in Harlem. We also need to use interdisciplinary approaches to improve how technology is fit and tailored for Black young adults. And so I know Dr. Little talked a little bit about kind of algorithmic bias in the healthcare system. And some work that we're doing right now is working with computer scientists to kind of dismantle some algorithmic bias and inherent racism in machine learning processes. So out in there. No, we're probably short on time. Oops.
Thank you so much, Dr. Willis and Dr. Washington, Dr. Little. I know we only have 3 minutes remaining, but you all gave such great information as we think about, as Dr. Washington setting us up with historical context, right? But then also providing examples and how to explain some of these complex issues and even maybe some issues that we weren't aware of or community members may not have been aware of. And then Dr. Little talking about cultural competency at the individual and the patient and the organizational level when we think about mental health or digital health tools. And then Dr. Willis specifically talking about mobile health apps and the development as we think about our young adult Black community members and the disparities that exist there and the things that we need to be mindful of when we're creating tools, and has even offered us some apps to consider, as well as the one that he is designing with his team. So it may be in this, I think we only have time for one question, but we have several here that I will be sharing. But what would you all suggest as recommendations or resources based on everything that you all have heard and shared today to help improve mental health literacy in various practices and provider spaces and so forth? You all gave some examples, but is there anything that you want to leave us with that you didn't get to share?
You know, I was just about to answer one of the questions, and I personally think that the Horowitz Center for Health Literacy at the University of Maryland is a great place to start in terms of getting access to specific research tools. It's really a suppository, I'm sorry, not suppository, a repository of information that you can tap into and have access to a lot of information. So I would start there.
Thank you, Dr. Little. Dr. Willis, Dr. Washington.
Yeah, I'm happy. Oh yeah, yeah. I'll just briefly, sorry, I'll just briefly share that there's a guide called Cyber Guide, PSYBER Guide, and that it hosts a lot of the mental health apps that have been reviewed that are helpful, and a lot of them are free. They're not all culturally tailored, but it could be a place to start in terms of integrating evidence-based kind of free mental health mobile health resources into your practice.
And I
Dr.
would suggest people look at, again, Brashan Shaw, and You Are a Warrior. We're working on an app there that is responsive to the dynamic needs of diverse populations. But I also think that we need to do what Dr. Willis stated so eloquently, is to make sure that we tune into the intent and the content. And
Oh, Dr. Washington froze for a moment. Oh,
Yeah, I think so.
okay. I think Dr. Washington um, lost connection there. But really quickly, thank you so much. We do have a question for Dr. Willis really quickly, but if everyone that can hear me, if you could provide your contact, if there's social media for individuals to be able to support your research and your work and connect with you all, that was a request from Tawana Hodge. And then Dr. Willis, last but not least, I'm wondering if your study also looked at mental health impact on popular apps, social media on Black youth and young adults.
Yeah, really great question. So some of the work that we did do is we looked at online racial discrimination on social media. So particularly we looked at the race-related experiences on like TikTok and Twitter and et cetera. And we did find an association between higher levels of these online racist experiences and higher kind of reports of mental health distress, like higher anxiety and depression.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Willis.
Yeah.
Well, I know that
Yeah.
we're 1 minute over time. If each of you could just share with our attendees, and thank you all for showing up. Wow, we had at one point 83 attendees to this presentation. So thank you for showing up and supporting, and we hope that you learned some information and some ways to improve the mental health literacy and your practices and organizations for the Black community. So Dr. Willis, Dr. Little, how can people find you and follow you and support you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Hey Artez, ARTEZ. I just put it in the chat. Please connect. I'm happy to discuss more about this via there. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Little?
I put in my LinkedIn connection. You can connect me. You can connect with me through LinkedIn. I'm not like Dr. Willis. I'm a lot older. And I have no social media connections whatsoever. But happy to connect with anyone who wants to have a conversation and follow up. Absolutely.
And I know Dr. Washington, we lost some connection with him, but he is at Grambling University, and his information you can also find on the conference's website. So thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dr. Little. Thank you, Dr. Willis. And thank you, Dr. Washington. This was so insightful. And I hope that we can continue this important discussion as we move forward to supporting our community members. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.